Segment 1, Risk Management. HYND. This is the first of 8 instructional sessions that make up the AAA Driver Improvement Program, Helping Your New Driver. The purpose of this program is to help you understand the risks involved in driving and how to better manage risk, the chance of injury, damage, or loss. Through the description of traffic situations, the program demonstrates that most collisions have many causes and nearly all can be prevented. The concepts presented in this section are: 1. Risk management. Involves controlling visibility, time, and space, and being aware of the amount of traction available. 2. Collision prevention. Collisions are caused by preventable mistakes committed by all drivers involved. And 3. Introduction to future sessions. Participant response questions will provide an introduction to each session of the program. Segment 1, Risk Management. Segment 1, Risk Management, is designed to emphasize how to control risk when driving.
The purpose of this program is to help you understand the risks involved in driving and how to better manage risk, the chance of injury, damage, or loss. Managing risk when you drive involves controlling visibility, time and space, and being aware of the amount of traction available. It is rare to be able to determine the level of risk with complete accuracy. However, there are guidelines that can help you assess conditions more accurately, predict the actions of other roadway users, and make decisions with a more realistic concept of the consequences. Available evidence shows that most drivers take about 5 years to reach the performance level of the general driving public. In fact, more than 40% of new drivers will receive either a traffic violation or be involved in a collision during their first 12 months of driving. Many of these collisions will result in injuries or fatalities. A number of factors contribute to traffic crashes. One major driver-related factor is lack of awareness of the level of risk associated with driving, of environmental conditions, or of cues to other highway users' possible actions. This lack of awareness is illustrated by a study that showed 37% of 11,878 drivers involved in crashes took no action to avoid the collision. For all practical purposes, they were unaware they were on a crash course. This problem appears to worsen with age. Another study revealed that only about 10% of drivers realize that nearly one driver in 5 is involved in a reportable crash annually. 30% believed the chances were only about 1 in 1,000. In short, they rationalized, "It will never happen to me." Unfortunately, if people are unaware of risk or refuse to accept the evidence of risk, they're not apt to try to control or reduce the level of risk. There are guidelines that can assist to more accurately assess conditions, predict the actions of other roadway users, and make decisions with a more realistic concept of the consequences. To help you understand these guidelines, put yourself in the driver's seat. The first guideline is: risk is always present. How would you assess the level of risk in these conditions? The probability of crash is about the same in A and B. While most drivers assume the level of risk is very low in both illustrations, they tend to think maybe situation B is the most dangerous. After all, even though there's no visible cross-traffic, there is an intersection. Situation A appears to be safe. The road is straight. There are no intersections or apparent threatening objects or conditions. Surprisingly, the consequences are about the same in A and B. Approximately 50% of all vehicle occupant fatalities involve single vehicle crashes. most of which occur on a relatively straight roadway. The driver runs off the road, responds incorrectly, if at all, strikes a fixed object, or overturns. This type of crash occurs more frequently among young drivers and drivers over 65 years of age. The basic difference is that whereas young drivers tend to crash at night, older drivers tend to have their mishaps during the day. The second guideline is perceived risk differs from actual risk. What factors indicate increased risk in these illustrations? From the position of the driver, the potential risk in situation A and B is about equal. The factor that signals increased risk in both situations is blocked vision. Whenever visibility is limited, drivers must be alert and respond to the increased risk rather than driving blindly into a crisis situation. The third factor is risk is shared. How can the roadway users in these situations affect the level of risk for others? Again, the risk is about equal in A and B. Depending on their actions, the people shown in both illustrations can either increase or decrease risk for each other. Whether the pedestrian in A runs across the road or you speed up, the action of either of you can affect the other. In situation B, the other driver may pull in front of you, or you may veer from your path to the right. It's important to remember that actions of all roadway users, pedestrians, animals, bicyclists, or drivers, affect all other users. The costs resulting from any collision are not restricted to persons who fail to take safety precautions. High medical and rehabilitation expenses affect everyone through higher insurance premiums and increased taxes. The fourth factor, risk can be altered. What would you do? Situation A is best handled by a slight reduction in speed, so you don't arrive at a point near the pedestrian until after the oncoming car passes. The worst action you could take in situation B would be to encourage the tailgater to pass. Managing risk starts with an aggressive visual search. An aggressive visual search of the roadway and off-road areas will give you more time and help you achieve early awareness of other highway users. Identify an escape route if needed. Determine how much traction there is. Predict possible actions of other highway users. Assess the consequences of alternative responses. Adjust your speed and/or position well in advance.
Segment 2, Collision Prevention. Segment 2, Collision Prevention, is designed to emphasize the prevention of traffic accidents rather than taking a legalistic approach to their causes.
You are among the approximately 171 million licensed drivers in the United States. The safety record is the best of any country in the world. American drivers average over 1 million miles of driving for each injury-producing crash. This still adds up to about 2 million injuries each year, at a cost of over $90 billion. Who causes these accidents? Is it speeders? Reckless drivers? Sometimes it is. People who break traffic laws are more likely to have accidents than people who don't. Yet the great majority of drivers in accidents are people who have a good driving record. People who drive safely most of the time make a bad mistake every once in a while. Let's look at a typical collision. The driver of the blue car is about to enter an expressway collector-distributor lane. He's waiting for the red car to pass. As soon as that car passes, the driver of the blue car speeds up so he can get out in front of the yellow car. Oops! The driver of the red car realizes he is about to miss his exit. He lays on the brakes to slow down for the off-ramp. The driver of the blue car is checking on traffic coming up from behind and doesn't see what's happened. Now he does, but it's too late to stop. What could each driver have done to prevent the collision? Consider the reactions of the driver of the red car, the blue car, the yellow car.
The basic mistakes committed by each of the drivers involved were as follows. The driver of the red car made a sudden lane change without signaling. The probable cause for this behavior was failure to pay attention to signs identifying the interchange and the fact that he wanted to get off at this point. In short, it demonstrates the risks of failing to devote one's entire attention to driving. The correct action would have been to drive on to the next exit when he realized the nature of his mistake. The driver of the blue car failed to give proper attention to the road ahead when observing traffic on the expressway collector-distributor. This mistake was compounded by his failure to 1. Anticipate cars slowing in the path ahead, 2. Failure to realize that the acceleration lane was also a deceleration lane for exiting traffic. The driver of the yellow car failed to slow adequately and make a lane change at the proper time, thereby preventing the driver of the blue car from devoting full attention to the road ahead. He didn't realize that lane change courtesy is often a matter of self-preservation. Changing lanes sooner would have been better than slowing, since a lane change signal would have been obvious to the driver of the blue car than a slight change in speed. In summary, this crash was the result of mistakes made by each of the persons involved rather than deliberate, unsafe driving acts. Regardless of who is legally at fault, most collisions can be prevented by the properly timed responses of one or more of the persons involved. This course will not be concerned with the question of who is legally responsible for a crash, but rather the prevention of collisions. Segment 3. Introduction to Future Sessions. Segment 3 provides an introduction to the concepts presented in the training program. They are seeing, communicating, adjusting speed, margin of safety, driving emergencies, your car, and you the driver.
This course is intended for drivers who want to do a better job of protecting themselves against other drivers and against their own mistakes. In other words, it's designed to help you become a safe driver. As an experienced driver, you already know a lot about safe driving. Yet there are probably some things you don't know. To help you find out how much you know, we have a short quiz. The questions are taken from subjects that will be covered in this course. There are 8 questions in all. I'll give you the correct answers after each question, so you don't have to write your answers down. However, you might want to keep track of how many you get right. Here's the first question. The blue car in the right lane is parked. The driver of the white car plans to use that driveway on the right in order to turn around. How should he do it? Should he drive in head first? Should he back in? Or should he use a portion of the driveway to begin a U-turn? The safest procedure generally is to back in. This lets you come out head first, and you can see traffic coming from both directions. Being able to see is one of the most important principles of driving. Almost all of what we do behind the wheel is a response to what we see. That's why the first session in this course will be devoted to the subject of seeing. It will tell you how to use your eyes better to see things ahead, to the sides, and behind. It will discuss factors such as visual acuity, night vision, glare recovery, and other physical changes that are restrictive. It will also address vehicle design and restrictions on your ability to see. Here's the next question. In a situation like this, what is the most important thing to look out for? Is it the car approaching on the left, the one with the left turn signal on? Is it the van up ahead in the right lane? Or is it the car just ahead on your right? This is usually the greatest danger. Anyone stuck behind a slow-moving vehicle is a good bet to change lanes. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that the driver who is most likely to pull out is the one just ahead of you, and he'll do it without a signal. That's because you're in his blind spot and can't be seen unless he turns and looks over his shoulder. This situation illustrates one of the ways in which communication takes place on the highway. We'd like to think that drivers could be counted on to communicate through the use of signals, like the driver of that oncoming car. Unfortunately, they don't always do that. The driver on your right didn't, but there were signs that told you he might change lanes. Reading those signs is part of the process of communication. The session called Communicating will tell you how you can do a better job of communicating your intentions to other drivers and how to read those little signs that tell you what they are about to do. This session will also include information on roadway markings, traffic signs, and signals, and how features built into your vehicle assist you to better communicate with other drivers. All right, here's the third question. Getting onto a busy freeway is sometimes difficult. You may have to wait several seconds before there's a gap in traffic large enough for you to squeeze into. Where should you start adjusting speed? At the top of the ramp? Part way down the ramp? Or should you go all the way to the bottom of the ramp and wait? The place to start adjusting speed is at the top of the ramp. As soon as you can see traffic on the roadway you want to enter. If you start at the top of the ramp, you'll have time to find a gap and adjust your speed as necessary before you move into the highway. It's important that you adjust to the speed of the traffic before you enter the freeway. This situation illustrates an important fact about speed, and that is that safe driving isn't always a matter of driving slowly. A driver who pulls onto most freeways at less than 45 miles per hour is in danger of causing an accident. A safe speed may be faster or slower. It depends on conditions. This session, called Adjusting Speed, will discuss things that help you determine what a safe speed is. Things like the condition of the road, how far ahead you can see, weather, traffic conditions, and your overall physical well-being. This driver has a little job ahead of her. The left rear tire is going flat. Where should she change it? Should she leave the car here on the paved shoulder, pull partly onto the grass, pull entirely onto the grass? This is the safest way to do it. Trying to change a tire with cars and trucks whizzing by within a few feet is nerve-wracking. It's also dangerous. Many people are killed each year in such situations. This driver needs to keep as much distance between herself and passing traffic as possible. By moving as far to the right as possible, she is keeping a margin of safety between herself and passing traffic. The session called A Margin of Safety describes how you, as a driver, can keep distance between yourself and others as you drive. By giving you more time to react to mistakes of other drivers, this margin of safety works almost like a protective shield to keep you out of accidents. Sometimes there is no margin of safety. This driver's less than a second away from a head-on collision. What's the best course of action? Swing over into the left lane, pull partially onto the shoulder, head right all the way off the road. Leaving the roadway is the only thing that is reasonably sure to prevent a serious crash. Fortunately, situations like this don't arise very often. But when they do, a driver's chances of surviving are better if he's given some thought to what he's going to do in advance. The session called Driving Emergencies deals with some of the more common emergencies and what to do about them. It will discuss emergencies caused by weather conditions and car problems, as well as those caused by other drivers. Now, on to question 6. A tire this slick might be all right on the drag strip, but on the family car, it's dangerous. But what's the biggest risk you face from a tire like this? Is it a blowout, poor braking, or loss of control? All three can result from a bald tire. However, only a small number of crashes are caused by blowouts. On the other hand, bald and underinflated tires contribute to both poor steering control and braking performance, especially if there's gravel or water on the roadway. You can drive a long time on bald tires and not get into trouble. Then, when you need to stop in a hurry or make a quick turn, nothing happens. The time to be concerned about what kind of shape your car is in is now, before you run into trouble. The session called Your Car describes some of the more important things you can do to make sure your car is ready for anything. Well, almost anything. And that brings us to question 7. How many of the fatal crashes that occur on the highway do you think result from use of alcohol? Is it about a tenth, a quarter, or half? Amazing as it may seem, alcohol is involved in about 1/2 of all highway deaths. It's the #1 killer. That's why judges are cracking down on drinking and driving. The final session of this course, called You the Driver, discusses drinking and driving. It isn't one of those if you drink, don't drive lectures. We know that people who drink aren't going to give it up for the sake of driving. The session offers practical suggestions on how drinkers can combine the two without becoming a menace to themselves and others on the road if they do decide to drink and then drive. This session also offers suggestions on how to be a responsible host or hostess. Now, here's the last question. About 58,000 Americans were killed in Vietnam during the 10 years of the Vietnam War. In a single year, how many people die on American highways? Half as many as in the Vietnam War? Twice as many? 20% fewer than in the Vietnam War. In 1 year, the number of Americans killed on U.S. highways is about 44,000, about 20% fewer than the number of Americans killed in the entire 10 years of the Vietnam War. Most of them were experienced drivers like yourself. Most were pretty good drivers. But many would still be alive if they had been a little better. Well, how'd you do? If you answered all of the questions correctly, you deserve to be congratulated. Few people do that. Most experienced drivers get at least 1 or 2 of the questions wrong. That doesn't mean they don't drive safely. Many of them are very safe drivers. But they make mistakes from time to time. And even when they do the right thing, they don't always know why it's the right thing. Courses like these have been given to millions of experienced drivers like yourself. There is practically no one who didn't learn something. Almost all have said they felt the course was valuable to them. I hope you will too.
The next session contains information on seeing. It will stress the importance of vision, knowing what to look for, and how to gather information that will assist you in establishing a safe path of travel. Before viewing the next session, please read Chapter 1, Seeing, in the text Managing Visibility, Time, and Space. Your understanding of the concepts presented in each instructional session, 2 through 8, will be accessed through the use of a short quiz consisting of 1 to 3 items following the discussion slides, which will be presented at the conclusion of each concept presentation. The correct answers with explanations will be provided at the end of each session.